When you think of a simple penny, the kind that jingles at the bottom of a pocket or sits forgotten in a desk drawer, the word valuable doesn't usually come to mind. But that's where the beauty of coin collecting really shines. Sometimes the most unassuming coin, the sort you've walked past on the sidewalk, ends up being a hidden treasure worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Today we're diving into 3 such coins, pennies that many people have overlooked, but that hold fascinating stories and surprising value. And to start us off, let's talk about a coin that often slips under the radar, the 1967 United States 1-cent piece. Now at first glance, the 1967 penny looks like any other Lincoln cent. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile graces the obverse. The Lincoln Memorial occupies the reverse, and it's struck in the usual bronze alloy of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. But what makes 1967 stand out isn't some flashy design change or obvious error, it's the year itself, and the circumstances surrounding American coinage at the time. This was the height of the coin shortage crisis in the United States, a period that completely reshaped the way coins were minted and distributed. In 1965, the U.S. Mint began dropping mint marks altogether, a decision that continued through 1967. The thinking was simple. Collectors were hoarding coins with certain mint marks, especially ones from San Francisco and Denver, and the Treasury hoped that by removing mint marks, they would discourage speculation and put more coins back into circulation. That's why, when you look at a 1967 penny, you won't see that familiar D or S beneath the date. Every single one is simply dated 1967. And unless you know the history, you might never realize why. The mintage of 1967 cents was enormous. Over 3 billion struck across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco facilities. That volume alone suggests they shouldn't be rare. And yet, it's not the sheer quantity that determines a coin's desirability. For collectors, condition and context are everything. The irony of the 1967 penny is that while billions were made, so many ended up heavily circulated. People didn't think twice about spending them. Mint sets from this period are notoriously poor in quality control as well, meaning sharp, pristine strikes are significantly scarcer than casual observers might assume. What makes the 1967 cent truly interesting is the role it plays in transitional collecting. It bridges the classic pre-1965 era, when silver still circulated, and the modern clad coinage era that defined U.S. money from then on. For penny specialists, 1967 represents a moment of policy experimentation, the mint grasping for control over a situation that was spiraling with hoarding and shortages. And because of that, these cents hold a special place in numismatic history. Now let's get into the values, because that's where yours perk up. For an average worn 1967 penny, you're really just looking at its copper content, which as of today is worth a couple of cents at best. Nothing life-changing there. But condition flips the story on its head. High-grade examples certified in mint state, especially MS66 or higher with brilliant red luster, command impressive prices. As of recent auction results, a 1967 Lincoln cent graded MS67 red sold for well over $2,000. That's right, something that spent most of its life being worth a penny is now 1,000-fold more valuable, simply because it survived in immaculate condition. Even more dramatic are the rare proof-like strikes and special mint set versions. Remember, the mint didn't issue traditional proof sets in 1967. Instead, they created what were called special mint sets, or SMS, in an effort to satisfy collector demand while easing the burden of production. These SMS coins can have unusually sharp details, satiny finishes, and in rare cases, an almost cameo-like appearance. When you come across a 1967 penny with that distinctive special mint set look, you're dealing with a coin that can fetch hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars if the grade is high and the eye appeal is strong. Errors from this year add another layer of excitement. With billions being struck and the mint operating under pressure, mistakes slip through. Off-center strikes, double dies, and even clipped planchets from 1967 are collectible, and some command four-figure prices depending on severity. Double die obverse in particular, while not common, are prized by specialists who relish the quirks of mid-20th century minting. One fascinating little tidbit about 1967 cents is how they pop up in unexpected places. Stories circulate of collectors inheriting old jars of change, only to discover pristine 1967 SMS examples nestled among regular coins. Others have stumbled across rolls of uncirculated 1967 cents tucked away in bank vaults or family safes, sometimes preserved by sheer accident. It's that element of chance that keeps the hobby alive, the possibility that what you thought was a dull copper coin turns out to be something extraordinary. The key lesson with this coin is how condition and context can transform perception. Take a heavily circulated 1967 penny, and it's worth next to nothing. Take a bright, fully read example with crisp details, and suddenly you're talking about hundreds of dollars. Push that grade higher, into MS67 or beyond, and you're in rarefied air where registry set collectors battle fiercely for the best. That competition drives up prices and ensures that even commandate cents from massive mintages can become hotly contested treasures. I think what makes the 1967 penny so appealing to seasoned collectors, especially those in their 40s and 50s, is that it's not just a coin, it's a memory of a turbulent time in American coinage. Many people alive today can recall when mint marks disappeared, when banks rationed coins, and when everyday money suddenly felt scarce. Owning a high-grade 1967 cent connects you directly to that history, a reminder of the era when the mint was scrambling to maintain trust in the nation's coinage. And there's something wonderfully ironic about it, isn't there? A penny that nobody thought twice about, produced by the billions, now commanding four-figure auction results simply because it survived in the right way. That's the essence of coin collecting. It's not always about precious metals or limited mintages. Sometimes it's about the story a coin tells, the condition it endured, and the quirks of history that make it stand out. So while the 1967 penny might not glitter like a gold piece or dazzle like a silver dollar, it deserves its place in the spotlight. It's a quiet cornerstone in Lincoln cent history, a transitional coin that reveals how even the most ordinary denomination can transform into something collectors prize. And for those of us who enjoy the chase, it's a reminder to never overlook even the humblest coin in the pile. You never know what story it's hiding. Now that we've explored the 1967 penny in depth, let's move forward to another fascinating year. The mid-1980s brought with it a very different numismatic landscape, and one particular penny from 1985 holds its own set of surprises. When we step back to 1966, we land in the heart of one of the strangest and most turbulent times in American coinage history. The mid-1960s were defined by shortages, hoarding, and big changes at the mint. Silver had just been stripped out of dimes, quarters, and half dollars in 1965, and the coin hobby was exploding in popularity. People were saving everything in hopes it might become valuable later. To try and curb that frenzy, the mint did something radical. It stopped using mint marks altogether from 1965 to 1967. That's why if you look at a 1966 penny today, you'll see the date, but no D for Denver, no S for San Francisco, no mark at all. On the surface, the 1966 cent looks very familiar. It's a Lincoln Memorial reverse cent, the design in use from 1959 until 2008. The obverse features Lincoln's bust, still the same design Victor David Brenner first created way back in 1909. Composition-wise, the 1966 cent was struck in the traditional 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc alloy, so it has that rich, heavy feel that collectors love about pre-1982 pennies. In fact, that copper content alone is worth more than 1 cent, though of course, it's illegal to melt them for scrap. So what makes the 1966 penny stand out? The answer comes down to both history and condition. Historically, it represents a time when the mint was scrambling to stabilize America's coinage system. Without mint marks, there's no easy way to know if your coin came from Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, and that was intentional. The government wanted to take the spotlight off collecting so people would stop hoarding freshly struck coins. Ironically, that effort made 1966 cents an interesting part of the Lincoln series. because they exist as a kind of anonymous issue, mints working at full tilt, but no way to tell one source from another. In terms of sheer numbers, the mint struck over 2.1 billion cents in 1966. That's a big number, so it's natural to think the coin can't possibly be rare. And in warm condition, that's true. A circulated 1966 penny is basically worth face value. You could have 100 of them in a jar, and they'd still just add up to $1. But again, the story changes drastically in top condition. Fully red examples with sharp details and no carbon spotting are much tougher to find than people assume. The coins of the mid-1960s just weren't made with the same precision as earlier proofs or later moderns, and so pristine survivors are coveted. Auction records prove this point. A 1966 cent-graded MS-67 red by PCGS brought well over $2,000 in recent years. To the casual eye, it's just a penny, but to collectors chasing a complete high-grade set, it's a key piece. Even MS-66 red coins can sell for hundreds. The jump from one grade to the next is dramatic because the pool of coins at the top is so small. Another fascinating wrinkle is that proof sets were suspended during these years. Instead, the mint issued what were called special mint sets, SMS coins, in 1965, 1966, and 1967. These weren't true proofs, but they weren't regular circulation strikes either. They often have sharper details and smoother fields than typical business strikes, though without the deep mirror finish of proofs. For 1966, these SMS pennies are especially interesting because of the variety in finish quality. Some look nearly proof-like with cameo contrast, while others look more like a well-struck circulation coin. Collectors love to hunt down the best-looking SMS examples, and high-grade cameo pieces can fetch hundreds of dollars. Then there are the errors. The rush of minting billions of coins under new rules meant that mistakes slipped through. 1966 double dies exist, though they're scarce and not widely recognized by casual hobbyists. Off-center strikes are another collectible variety, as well as clipped planchets. Each of these errors transforms an otherwise common coin into something special and adds to the year's intrigue. For those who lived through the 1960s, the 1966 penny is also a piece of personal history. Many collectors in their 40s, 50s, and beyond remember the shortage vividly: banks rationing rolls, kids scouring change for mint marks, families pulling coins out of circulation in the hope they'd become valuable. A jar of 1966 cents isn't just a bunch of coins, it's a snapshot of a time when the country's everyday money was in flux, when pocket change was part of the national conversation. And that brings us to the condition-based value variations. As with most Lincoln cents, circulated coins are essentially face value. Average uncirculated coins, say MS-63 to MS-64 red, might bring a few dollars. Move up to MS-65 red and you're talking $20 to $40. At MS-66, prices climb into the low hundreds. At MS-67, as mentioned, you're well into the four-figure range. The SMS coins follow a similar curve, with most examples being affordable, but those rare high-grade cameo strikes commanding serious premiums. It's all about finding that perfect blend of sharp strike, blazing color, and immaculate surfaces. There's also something satisfying about how the 1966 penny closes the circle of this particular coin story. Where the 1967 cent shows us the height of the Mintmark moratorium, and the 1985 cent shows us the zinc era in full swing, the 1966 cent is the bridge, the quiet workhorse caught in the middle of transition. Billions were made, most spent, most forgotten. Yet today, in the right condition, they can command values that surprise even seasoned collectors. One story I remember hearing involved a collector who inherited a small collection from his father. Inside was a tube of 1966 cents, all untouched, still bright red from the day they were struck. When he sent them off for grading, a handful came back as MS-66 reds, instantly turning that overlooked tube into several $1,000s of value. It's discoveries like that which make the hobby so endlessly rewarding, the thrill of finding treasure in something ordinary. And ultimately, that's what the 1966 penny represents. On the surface, it's common. But underneath, it's a symbol of change, resilience, and the surprises that hide in plain sight. For collectors, it's a chance to own a piece of that story, to hold a coin that's more than copper, it's history you can touch. So next time you spot a penny, don't dismiss it as just a cent. Take a closer look. Because as we've seen, even the humblest coin can hold extraordinary secrets. By the time we reached 1985, the Lincoln cent had already gone through one of the biggest changes in its long history. Just a few years earlier, in 1982, the composition had been altered from nearly pure copper to a copper-plated zinc core. That decision was purely economic. The rising price of copper meant it was actually costing the mint more than 1 cent to produce each penny. Switching to zinc solved the problem for the treasury, but for collectors it created a whole new dividing line. Pre-1982 cents feel heavy and solid, while post-1982 issues have a lighter ring to them, and of course, a very different inner metal. The 1985 penny sits firmly on the zinc side of that line, and it's a coin that offers more intrigue than most casual collectors realize. The obverse still shows Victor David Brenner's classic portrait of Lincoln, a design first introduced in 1909 and by then already the longest-running design in U.S. coinage. The reverse still displayed the Lincoln Memorial, that iconic image introduced in 1959 to commemorate Lincoln's 150th birthday. But by 1985, the way these coins were being produced had shifted dramatically. The mint was pushing out massive numbers of cents each year, well over 5 billion in 1985 alone across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. On paper, that makes the 1985 penny sound painfully common. After all, billions exist. But as with so many things in numismatics, the devil is in the details. The first thing collectors notice with 1985 cents is strike quality. During the early zinc years, the mint struggled with achieving sharp, even strikes. The thin copper plating could sometimes blister or bubble, and the lighter metal underneath meant dies wore out faster. As a result, many 1985 pennies in circulation look a little soft, lacking crisp detail on Lincoln's hair or the memorial's columns. High-grade coins with razor-sharp strikes and full original red color are considerably harder to find than the mintage numbers might suggest. That scarcity and pristine condition is what drives their collectible value. When it comes to value, the difference between an everyday 1985 penny and a top-notch one is night and day. In your pocket, a worn 1985 cent is exactly what it says, a cent. Maybe 2 if you scrap it for metal, but not much more. But in certified mint state, especially MS-67 and above, you enter an entirely different world. Registry collectors who build sets of Lincoln Memorial cents compete fiercely for those highest graded examples, and that demand pushes prices into the hundreds and, in some cases, thousands. One particularly eye-catching sale saw a 1985 penny-graded MS-67 red by PCGS hammer for over $3,000 at auction. That's the magic of condition rarity. A common coin becomes a trophy because of its grade. Now, beyond condition, eras and varieties are where the 1985 penny becomes truly exciting. This year is notorious among era hunters because several significant double dies and misstrikes surfaced. The most famous of these is the 1985 double die obverse, where doubling can be seen in the date and lettering. Strong examples of this variety are worth several $100s, even in circulated grades. Then you've got off-center strikes, broad strikes, and misaligned dies. 1985 seems to have produced more than its fair share of them, likely due to the increased strain of mass production during the zinc transition. Collectors specializing in era cents consider this year one of the more fertile hunting grounds in the 1980s. The San Francisco Mint also struck proof coins in 1985, and these are a world apart from their circulation cousins. The mirror-like fields, frosted devices, and cameo contrast make them popular among collectors. While modern proofs are generally plentiful, finding a flawless example with deep cameo and without spotting or haze can be trickier than expected. A 1985 proof cent graded PR70 deep cameo is worth far more than you'd think for such a modern coin, sometimes reaching into the hundreds. For collectors building proof sets, that tiny jump in grade from PR69 to PR70 makes all the difference, and the prices reflect it. What's particularly interesting about the 1985 penny is how it represents the maturation of the copper-plated zinc era. In 1982 and 1983, the transition was still fresh, with a mixture of copper and zinc cents in circulation and a lot of inconsistency in minting. By 1985, the mint had settled into its new process, but it still hadn't perfected it. That means these coins tell a story about adjustment, about how America's most humble coin adapted to the economic realities of the time. For collectors who lived through the 80s, there's also a nostalgia factor. Many of us remember pulling bright red 1985 pennies from pocket change, the dates standing out in that chunky 1980s font, feeling new and modern compared to the darker, heavier copper cents of earlier decades. Another fascinating detail lies in the market behavior. For a long time, 1985 cents didn't get much love from collectors. They were just too common. But as registry set collecting took off in the early 2000s, suddenly every date and mintmark combination mattered, because only one collector could own the finest example. That competition shined a spotlight on the 1985 penny, and today it's recognized as a sleeper date. Not rare in mintage, but tricky in top grade, and therefore highly collectible. Condition is everything here. Take a circulated 1985 penny from your change, and you'll struggle to get more than a cent or two for it. Take an uncirculated one, bright red and free of spots, and you might be looking at $5 or $10. Bump that up to MS66 red, and the price jumps into the double or triple digits. And at the elite level, MS67 red or higher, you're into four-figure auction territory. It's that steep curve that makes collecting modern Lincoln cents such a fascinating challenge. One fun anecdote I've heard from fellow collectors is about entire bank boxes of 1985 pennies being searched in the 1990s and early 2000s, back when rolls were easy to come by. Most of those searches turned up little more than average uncirculated coins, but once in a while, someone would stumble on a gem. It's those stories of persistence and luck that fuel the hobby. Hours of searching, and then the thrill of spotting a blazing red cent with perfect surfaces. The chase itself is part of the reward. Having explored the 1985 cent and its unique place in the Lincoln series, it's time to rewind just a little further in history. The year before the mintmark moratorium of the late 1960s, another 1-cent piece emerged that's worth a closer look. The 1966 penny may not grab headlines, but its story and its value surprises make it every bit as compelling.